Time and Tide by Misdemeanor1331. Chapter 10. 7 years later. The cold woke Hermione first. That the chilly air had penetrated the flannel sheets didn't bode well for what was awaiting her beyond the confines of her bed. She snuggled down deeper into the pillow, tucking her nose under the blanket and trying for a return to unconsciousness. But her rustling had woken her bedfellow. Or perhaps he'd already been awake. Draco was a poor sleeper on the best days, turning in late, resting fitfully and rising early. He only lingered when he wanted something. And his arm snaked around her waist and pulled her close. She knew immediately what that something was. His erection pressed firmly against her bum. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" she murmured. His breath puffed against her bare neck, followed by the press of his lips. Hermione kept her hair short now, her once wide curls smoothed into waves by a pixie cut, which she diligently trimmed whenever she started to recognize herself. "Fire burned out last night," Draco said. "My fault. Didn't feed it enough." "So this is selfish," she teased. "You were cold and wanted to get warm." "No, this is noble. You were shivering and I wanted to warm you." His hand drifted from her stomach to her breast, his fingers finding her left nipple and teasing it to a peak. "How am I doing?" She shifted her ear against him. "I've had better." He tweaked her nipple, then trailed his hand back down her body. He loosened the drawstring tie of her cotton pajama pants with a single pull, and worked his hand beneath the elastic. Hermione rolled half onto her back to open her legs and let him explore. She closed her eyes and drifted, losing herself in the sensation. Her name, a whisper, a warning, but above all, a secret. Hermione. She felt herself tighten around him, the pressure welling the muscles of her core on her hair-triggered set to explode. "Again," she whispered. "Hermione." His fingers pressed into her skin off her hips, rocking her forward and back, increasing the friction, the tempo. She clenched around him as a second orgasm overtook her, wiping away everything but him. The sour taste of his skin, the musk of his release, the strength of his arm. The way he said her name. How he risked it for her. How they risked it for each other. Because that's what this was. Time stolen in a world from which they'd chosen to disconnect. The destruction of the Order had indeed been its death knell, and Voldemort's ascendance was completed soon after. Their names, their true identities, were hidden by necessity but bared to each other in these moments of intimacy, where she at least could embrace who she was and what she'd done while remaining separate from the guilt of it. In her new life, Hermione didn't crusade for the rights of others or fight against a pernicious evil. She was just a young woman who worked in the Helmsday Café, quite bookish and little sad. People called her Jean, if they knew her name at all, and Draco, Lewis now, was no longer a man held hostage by powers he couldn't overcome. He had joined a fishing boat crew, earning calluses on his palms and the respect of his crewmates. They had hidden there once beneath a stone in front of their shared hearth. They had found no reason to draw them. Magic no longer had a presence in their life. At least not the type they'd grown up knowing. The magic they claimed now was found in each other, in how they came together when every inch of her pressed against every inch of him, in how they separated when Hermione would cook breakfast and Draco would head out back to split wood for the fire. And how they lived as an ordinary couple with pasts they didn't discuss and a future they tried not to plan. Hermione rested her head up on Draco's shoulder, skin prickling with goose flesh as he trailed his fingers up and down her back. "Will you swim today?" She heard the catch in his tone and pushed herself up, searching his eyes and finding a familiar fear buried within the storm-cloud grey. Hermione thought suddenly of her grandfather who had stolen her grandmother's sealskin and kept it hidden for most of her life. At the time, Hermione had thought his actions cruel. Now she knew better. Her grandfather was right to be distrustful, not of her grandmother but of the sea. It was a wild place, unpredictable, moving with forces that were beyond her control and teeming with predators that were far more lethal than a common harbor seal. One mistake was all it would have taken. One chance encounter would have undone their entire lives. Everything they had built, everything they had hoped to build. Hermione and Draco had already lived one undoing. They had clung to one another in the void. To risk another felt unconscionable. Without her, Draco would have no one, and without him, Hermione would be lost. She smiled and pressed her lips to his, a reassurance and a promise. She wouldn't swim today. She wouldn't swim for the rest of the year. The parts of her that yearned for freedom, which ached for flight and purpose of the grand ideations of youth, had been worn smooth, finally weathered by time and tide. The end. Thank you for listening to Time and Tide by Misdemeanor1331. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, and Ao3.